I remember precisely where I was when the awful, awkward, alarming, attention-arresting news of a 16-year-old black boy named Ralph, who at his mother's request had gone to pick up his twin brothers in a quiet neighborhood in Kansas City, Missouri. He was supposed to be going to 115 Northeast Terrace, but he got things mixed up, as 16-year-olds may, and he went to 115 Northeast Street. When he rang the bell, he was shot in the head by an 84-year-old white homeowner. Depending on which version of the story you saw or heard or read, this innocent boy, standing outside a door that he could not open, looking for his brothers, may have been shot through the front door. Or some say he was shot through a screen door. Maybe front door, maybe screen door. What we know for sure is he was shot through the head. Can you see him? Young, gifted, black, standing outside a door that he cannot open, looking for his brothers, looking for family, waiting for someone who loves him, who can see him, who can hear him to come through that door. Watch him, if you will, as he opens the driver's side door, steps out of the car, 16-year-olds reaching for his cell phone, I'm sure, walking gently, slowly up the shallow steps toward the door that he believes separates him from his brothers. Look at him standing there, scrolling through his phone. He reaches casually for the doorbell, presses it slightly. He's smiling as he scrolls. What's he thinking? What's he telling himself about why the door has not been opened yet? He's standing there outside a door that he cannot open, waiting for his brothers, and perhaps scrolling through Facebook, liking posts from his friends and family. Maybe he's not on social media. Maybe he's texting folks about music recital that's coming up. But then suddenly, as quickly as a mockingbird sensing danger looks up, he's hit by a bullet from the other side of the door. Some sources say the shot to the head came later, after Ralph was already down. This is a tragic story, and I can see on your face that you share that with me. It's a tragic story. But you know what the irony of this story is? The irony is that just because Ralph arrived at the wrong address does not necessarily mean that what he went there looking for could not have been there. The conversation would have gone something like this. Hi, my name is Ralph. I'm here to pick up my brothers. Oh, you must be at the wrong address. Okay, thank you so much. And he would have gone on with his day, and so would the homeowner. Had this homeowner possessed any sense of vision, Ralph would have never been shot, and he would have found brotherhood there. Problem was, homeowner could not see Ralph. Ralph was invisible to him, except for the adjectives that took center stage for the shooter. Ralph was black. Ralph was a danger. Ralph was threatening. Not only could his brothers have been there, but Ralph's brothers should have been there. The only reason brotherhood was not found on the other side of that door, the guy had no virtue. Even his grandkids say he was driven by fear and hate, watching Fox News on the cycle. Brotherhood could have been behind the door. Brotherhood should have been behind the door. Brotherhood would have been behind the door had this gentleman had less extreme values. Eddie Glaude professor, distinguished professor of African American Studies at Princeton, says the largest problem that America faces is that of the value gap. The value gap, it's a way of saying that folks in America simply value white folks over and above black and brown folks. In his book, Democracy in Black, he said, he lays out all these different ways that this shows up in our society. This young boy, beautiful black boy, standing outside a door that he could not open, was shot in the head, and he fell into the value gap. Now, my people, if you will, Jay-Z, if he was here now, he would say, this is where I say to you, I'm not new to this, I'm true to this. I've been on this planet for 60 years. And yes, I do look good, you're right. And I confess to you, though, that these last 6 or 7 years have been the most difficult for me. Why, you ask? Good question. I'm glad you asked. This is my best response to you. As a black man living in America, I frequently find myself standing outside doors that I cannot open. And when I reach for the doorbell or try to call attention to my needs, shots fired. Sometimes these shots hit my head. Sometimes these shots hit my heart. I say it loudly when it happens. If I'm driving in my car or in a grocery store, I say shots fired daily. I'm a father trying to raise a young black girl to be academically aware, physically flexible, socially self-sufficient, spiritually sustainable, a woman who sees herself as enough, just as she is. But I live in a country that elects a man president who talks on television about grabbing women by their genitals, kissing them against their will. Shots fired. Black parishioners in South Carolina at a prayer meeting. Supremacist walks in, prays with them, and kills them all. Shots fired. Black community members go to grocery store in Buffalo. White supremacist shows up, sprays the store, killing as many black people as he can. Shots fired. Police officers pull over a man in Minnesota, his girlfriend and his girlfriend's daughter in the back seat. He tells the police, as he should, that he has a permit to carry a weapon and he has it on him. Police officer asks him to take out the weapon slowly. He reaches to do so. Police officer is triggered by something and shoots several times into the car, killing Philando Castile. Shots fired. I wake up early on Sunday morning and leave my wife and daughter resting comfortably in the East Bay. Come here to UUCPA. I prepare the welcome table just out there, and I speak and greet people, new people, old people, all the same. Hi, how are you? How are you doing today? Good morning. And you may not believe it, but some people make direct eye contact with me and say nothing. Shots fired. I prepared to the best of my ability for an occasion like this, June of last year, to give a sermon in this space. Confessional sermon. It was difficult for me to give, and I talked about some difficult matters in it. But after the sermon was over, a member of this church walked up to me, shook my hand, and wanted to know how I became so articulate. He asked me whether or not all the members of my family speak as well as I do. Shots fired in a pandemic, no less. Is that micro or macro aggression, Susan? Shots fired. Listen to me, please, if you haven't already. All I'm trying to do, standing outside these many doors that I cannot open, is find my family, find my people, find connectivity to folks who see me, hear me, and love me. Here's the question. What do you do when you find yourself standing outside doors you can't open, looking for family, looking for connectivity, looking for some sign from the other side of the door that you're recognized as something other than a threat? I brought my friends here today, Francesca and Robert, to help us with answering that question. They say that we should do what comes natural to us. We should engage in the fine art of making love. What does that look like? I'll give you 3 quick samples and I'll take my seat. It's 1965. Robert and Francesca Johnson encounter each other randomly. Francesca's husband, 2 teenage kids, have left town and they've gone to the Illinois State Fair to show off their prize steer. Francesca is filling her day doing the kinds of things that people did in 1965. She's doing laundry, she's running errands. Robert Kincaid is a photographer for National Geographic magazine, sent to Iowa to do a story on all of the bridges in Madison County. He has a map, but he's having difficulty finding a particular bridge, Roseman Bridge in particular. Francesca is outside her house on the front porch, just as Robert is passing, and instinctively, he pulls over right in front of her house. Imagine his surprise when he says to her, "Hi, my name's Robert. I think I'm lost." And Francesca walks slowly toward him and says, "Are you supposed to be in Iowa?" And Robert says, "Yes." And Francesca says, "Well, then you're not that lost." Robert and Francesca share this banter back and forth. I think I already see sparks flying. It's early, but the reader can sense that these two have chemistry. What the reader does not know is that in just a few hours, this chemistry will ignite, touch off a hot, burning passion. This marvelous, mature, married woman, this soulful, single citizen of the world, Robert, stepped boldly over that line of demarcation, which is intended to signal what is and what is not appropriate. I can hear you thinking, now some of you have already judged Francesca. Somebody in this room must believe that monogamy is the main dish to be served when love is on the menu. You're judging Francesca, I'm sure, but I'm here not to settle that debate today, maybe in December. But I'm here to push you just a bit, to ask you to empower this woman to make her own choices. She's a former teacher, after all. She's from Italy, for goodness sake. In what ways, and what must be currently a safe and secure relationship with her husband, who's a farmer. She has 2 teenage kids, one a girl, one a boy. They're not hard to manage, but put yourself in her position. Today, this tall, handsome stranger, much like myself, has pulled into her driveway, and he needs her help. Readers of this book, and I hope you will be, will tell you that the passion between these two heats up quickly as they get into the truck and they head toward the bridge. Francesca has said to Robert, "I can tell you where the bridge is, or I can show you. I can tell you or show you. It doesn't matter to me." And so he's surprised, but she gets in his truck and they head toward Roseman Bridge. Robert's right hand touches Francesca's left thigh. He's just reaching for a cigarette, and he brushes his hand over her thigh. The passion between these two is not limited, though, to the physical. Their passion has staying power. It has legs. It has deep roots. When you are making love, hear me now. I promised Amy I wouldn't go too far. When you're making love, there ought to be some screaming involved. Yeah, I said it. And there ought to also be some sincerity involved. So that I see you back here. There ought to be some sincerity too. When the screaming ends, and it will, you can at least lean back into a soft pillow and breathe in the sincerity of your partner. Shallow passion may breed compatibility, but deep passion breeds sustainability. Take it from a guy who's been around the block a few times. Selectively distributing passion in a relationship is a recipe for disaster. I was watching the Oscars with my daughter, Madison, not this last one, but the one before. Remember, Chris Rock was the host, and Chris Rock made some jokes about Will Smith's wife that Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith did not like, and Will Smith got up from his chair in the back of the room. You remember, those of you who saw it, got up from his chair in the back of the room, walked decisively through the crowd, and with his right hand and with the power of Muhammad Ali, he tore into the left cheek of Chris Rock. So forceful that it was amazing to me and Maddie that Chris Rock did not fall. We thought it must have been choreographed or faked in some way. It was not. But Chris Rock was quiet about it for about a year. And then just about a month or so ago, right before the Oscars came out again, Chris Rock came out on Netflix with a new comedy special. Guess what it was called? What did they call it? Selective anger? I can't remember the word. It was selective something. The point was that Will Smith was angry at Chris Rock in real time, so he was being selective about his anger. He wasn't selective when they were sitting at the red table. He wasn't selective when he was doing whatever he wanted to do in various places. He traveled around the world. Everybody in the black community knew that Will and Jada had an open relationship, but Chris Rock was just making a joke. But Will took it personally, came up and slapped him on national television. Will was being selective. He was deciding when he wanted to demonstrate his anger. It was a disaster then, and it is a disaster when we try to do it relative to love. Secondly, in order to make love, pain must be understood as part of the process. The author puts it this way. He puts these words in Francesca's mouth. I was wrong, Robert. I was wrong not to leave, but I can't go. Tell me again why I should go. Robert and Francesca spent several days, several nights making love. And as is its custom, love brought them to a fork in the road. They had to decide whether they would continue down this road they'd been on before they met, or risk it all and set out on a path that would leave grief for Francesca's family in their wake. The two of them wrestled with these possibilities and consequences the night before the family returned. Robert made his case, Francesca made her case, and then she went upstairs and she packed her bags. She was ready to go. As they stood talking before they left, Robert could see a change in Francesca. And he said, "You're not going with me, are you?" She was not. They planned to leave before the family returned, but Francesca made the decision to stay. The next morning, when her husband and children returned home, Francesca had very little time to recalibrate. Mere hours earlier, she had been, horizontal in her relationship with Robert. The fresh taste of new love still animated the pleasure center of her brain. And with the return of her children came the normal routines and responsibilities. It was this normalcy, this set of expectations placed on her by her family engagement that kept the longing for what Robert represented at bay. If you never expose me to that which is rare and exquisite, then I won't hunger for it. The regular is enough. But if I get a taste of what it is to be in the presence of that which is more powerful, that which has more seasoning, that which can transport me from this world to the next, if I'm allowed to scale the walls around me and encounter a truly passionate love, so passionate that her words feel like waves on me, so passionate that her touch leaves me trembling, so passionate that our social intercourse gets us to a place that most people can never even imagine. You must have heard the unknown poet say it, love is something so alive, description would just make it less. It's what we feel, but can't define. It's what we know, but can't express. The famous author, C.S. Lewis, I disagree with his theology, but he wrote a book called Surprised by Joy. The book is not about her, but he met a woman named Joy Morgenstern, and they became friends. She was married. And he was kind to her son, and when she got a divorce, she moved to where Lewis was. And wanting to get there, she asked him if they could get married so that he could extend his citizenship to her, and so he did. For one day, Joy collapsed, and she was discovered to have cancer of the bone, her left or right femur bone. Lewis was forced then to reckon with his feelings for her. He discovered that her presence in his life was much more significant than he allowed himself to admit. So much so that one quiet evening, he knelt beside her hospital bed and proposed to her again. This time, with all due respect and adoration. The cancer went into remission. For months, they traveled together while he spoke and signed books. Then one day, the cancer returned with a vengeance. The doctors told them she had weeks, not months, to live. They planned one last trip. They went to Golden Valley. While there, Joy tried to apologize to Lewis for not being able to be healthy and keep their love going to its natural conclusion. But Lewis put his hands on the sides of her face and said to her, "The pain now is part of the happiness then." The pain now is part of the happiness then. In order to make good love, I'm talking show enough good love, passion has to be understood as more than prologue. The last thing I want to say about it is that making good love involves promises being understood as more than just performative. Not only is passion to be seen as more than prologue, not only is pain to be understood as part of the process, but promises are understood as more than performative. In the final night they have together, Francesca says to Robert through her tears, "Robert, if you took me in your arms right now and carried me away to your truck and forced me to go with you, I wouldn't murmur a complaint. Please don't make me go. If I leave now, those thoughts will turn me into something other than the woman you've come to love." Those of us who are easily pulled in by these kinds of love stories and drama can see the language that the author is using here. He uses what I call elegant literary edging. Can I talk about edging at church? Have you heard that word before? Edging, where's my daughter? Edging, she's outside. Edging involves sexually explicit stimulation that stops before the point of no return. It involves extending a person's sexual gratification over longer periods of time. It's intended to intensify the experience. That's what this author does in this book that I hope you'll read with me. He injects suspense into an already known outcome. The climax of the story, you'll forgive the word there, won't you? The climax of the story is Francesca sitting in her husband's truck, and they have finished grocery shopping. Robert's been out of her home for a couple of days, and she thinks he might be gone, but it's pouring rain, and she peers through the front windshield, and across the street, she sees Robert Kincaid standing outside his truck, still giving her another chance to come and go with him. Her husband gets into the truck and she's crying, and he wants to know what's wrong with her. She says, just give me a minute, please. She watches Robert turn and get inside his truck. She puts her hand on the doorknob, and the suspense, of course, right, is whether she's going to pull the lever, get out and go, or is she going to stay? She grips the lever and the music changes, and it's a marvelous moment. Always brings me to tears. Francesca didn't exit the vehicle. Spoiler alert. She stayed. She did not go with Robert Kincaid. What I want you to note is that these two had ties that held them together. Robert died. They didn't make empty promises. Robert died, and he left all of what he had, photography equipment to Francesca. He says he never met another woman that was of interest to him. As for Francesca, she stayed with her husband. She stayed with her children. She did what she felt duty-bound to do. But every year, as Joe told us, on her birthday, she celebrated the love she had with Robert Kincaid. She'd sit down at the kitchen table and read Robert's letter. The same place where they sipped brandy and fell in love. I think I know where you were when the alarming, attention-arresting news arrived that a 16-year-old boy named Ralph, standing outside doors that he could not open, was shot in the head. Perhaps you were doing the same thing he was, just engaging in activity, hoping to find your people, your family, connectivity to community. We all want that. Even when we get directions, sometimes we can't find our location, and we get hurt by encounters with people with no vision, with no virtue, with no values. Sometimes we get pushed into that value gap by moral monsters. It is enough to make a person want to give up and quit. LeBron James, who angered me yesterday by beating the Warriors, is often asked why he's still fighting, why he's still out here, 20 years in these battles. He gave a great response recently. He said, I'm still here fighting these battles because my son's finishing high school and I want to play with my son. Brilliant response. I can't give up now because I want to be here to fight for my child and the next generation. I hope you'll join me when you find yourself standing outside doors that you can't open. Join me in engaging in the fine art of making love. We make good love when passion is understood as more than prologue. We make good love when pain is understood as part of the process. And we make good love when promises are understood as more than performative. One of those old songs, I can't remember the author, but I was sinking deep in pain, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply hurt within and sinking to rise no more. But the love of the sea heard my despairing cry. From the waters lifted me. Now safe am I. Love lifted me. Love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me. I got some good news. Ralph survived the shooting by the gentleman in Kansas City, Missouri. And he's recovering now. And so am I.